International economist Dambi Samoyo, in her 2009 book, Dead Aid, claims that aid is the cause of all Africa's problems and that no nation has ever attained economic development by aid. The calls for an Africa beyond aid has been going for a long time. This has found expressions in the President Akufo-Addo's famous catchphrase, Ghana beyond aid. Is it possible to truly wean Ghana off foreign aid, and what would it take to make that happen? Also, what do you make of the restructuring of Ghana Education Service to allow for a Director General in charge of technical and vocational training? To discuss these and more, I have with me Honorable Andrew Egyapa Mercer, Member of Parliament for Sekondi Constituency. I am Nana Akusia Kunidu, and this is The Hard Truth. Lawyer Andrew Egyapa Mercer, MP for Sekondi Constituency. It's in a hot seat today, and you are watching The Hard Truth. Welcome to The Hard Truth, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sekondi
then.
Sekondi Boko.
Yeah. When was the last time you went to Sekondi?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Christmas preparations and everything. How is it like the place now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. It's good to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
Right. Mercer. Can I call you Mercer?
Of course. You can even call me Andrew. Andrew is fine. Yeah.
Now, Andrew, friend, President Akufo-Addo has been consistent in stating his desire to move Ghana beyond aid, and he says that we are going to grow ourselves into a position whereby we are no longer dependent on external sources to finance our budget. This is a good talk, but really, how do we move beyond that talk to actually making it happen, and in what form is the agenda going to take?
Well, I guess good evening to your cherished viewers is in order, and particularly those in my constituency, Sekondi. Yes, the president has indeed been consistent. You recall that the first time that he made mention of the need for us to, as it were, move beyond aid was during his inaugural speech on the 7th of January 2017. Subsequently, at the State of the Nation address in Parliament, he re-echoed the same sentiments. Subsequently, at various fora, he's articulated clearly the need for us to move from our dependency on donor support, because, I mean, it's mind-boggling to see, particularly now that we're doing the budget reviews, to see the quantum of dependency on donor support on our budgets, and that he thinks that with the kind of resources that the good Lord himself has endowed this country, 60 years on, there's a need for us to move beyond the dependency syndrome.
Enough as a nation to say, well, we don't need anyone's support, we want to be by ourselves?
I haven't heard the president say that we do not need anybody's support at this stage. What he's essentially saying is that, look, we've been dependent enough for too long. It's about time that we start moving beyond that dependency status and be masters of our own destiny.
Really?
And so,
moving beyond what the president said, what is your own understanding of it, Ghana beyond aid? How do you understand that?
Well, I think it's an aspirational vision that the president has, and is a call to action, is a call to all of us to, as it were, start reorienting ourselves into believing and working towards the attainment of a Ghana that is self-sufficient, is not dependent on foreign donor support for our basic budgetary needs. And I think it's a good call. Of course, I mean, if we even relate it to our daily household sustenance, I mean, if you always have to go back to your parents to support your family, clearly you will be deemed by your parents, even though they may love you well enough not to voice it in your presence, to be...
But don't you think that we, as a nation, we need to get to a certain form, or we need to be solid in terms of infrastructure, in terms of development economically, before we can say, well, we are there now? we don't need your help.
But exactly the sentiments that the president expressed, that yes, we have gotten to the point where we have to start moving towards that trajectory where we would, at a certain point.
Better off? Are we seeing enough development? Do we have, I mean, are we okay as a nation to cut
No, we're
aid?
not. We're not. And I didn't hear, or I've not heard the president say that at this stage in our development agenda, we have gotten to the point where we do not need aid. What I hear him to be saying is that, look, we have been dependent for 60 years. It's about time that we build the blocks to take us out of the dependency mode. And that within a 10-year time frame, that the finance minister, when he delivered the Aliu Memorial lecture, clearly stated that within a decade, we should put in place blocks that has already started. That this economy that we're building is one that is geared towards attaining that status within a 10-year time frame.
But so, how difficult, again, or easy will it be for the president to prosecute this agenda in his first term?
Well, I don't think that it is intended to be achieved within the first term, because clearly the first term of the president is only 4 years. And if we have a 10-year plan to work our way out of aid dependency, then it cannot be the case that the president intends to achieve a Ghana beyond aid within 4 years. But clearly, the plan of action that has been put in place to take us there is what, for me, is critical. Clearly, the finance minister put a lot of detail to what the president has re-echoed in cabinet meetings severally, that every minister of state has had to have a buy-in, and they are all working in a concerted manner to achieve that Ghana beyond aid within the time frame that we've set ourselves. And he clearly indicated a 6-point agenda regarding our agriculture, our oil and gas space, our education, our bauxite, and entrepreneurship and banking. Clearly, specific targeted policy initiatives in these areas that were clearly outlined that the government is working towards will take us to the stage within a 10-year time frame that we can confidently
be dependent.
Absolutely.
I see. But let's look at this. Associate Professor of Law at the University of South Africa, Babatunde Fabiyibo, sees President, comment as club baiting and feel, it's a good rhetoric. In fact, his words were that President Akufo-Addo comments are not exactly novel, as they have been articulated in various platforms by current and former heads of state on the continent. The issue then is not so much about the rightness of the message as it is the genuineness of its follow-up. Is the president giving practical expressions to his words?
I think so, because he confronted the issue frontally and clearly articulated it at a forum that I have not heard many heads of state put out in the recent past. Of course, I can agree with him to some extent that this is not the first time that we've heard African leaders articulate the need for us to be moving away from aid dependency. However, the forum with which the president made this bold statement and articulated clearly his vision to take Ghana beyond aid.
Again, is it going to be an all-talk affair, Ghana beyond aid? So, yes, you mentioned the 6 points. Are we going to get there? Do you think Ghana is really going to get there?
The policies have already started in terms of agriculture. The clear intent is to move away from a country that, as it were, imports agricultural produce, where God has endowed us with so much arable land that we can feed the whole of West Africa and even have excess to export. And so, for instance, the Planting for Food and Jobs initiative, which is clearly directed at increasing our agricultural produce, is a step in the direction that will lead us into winning ourselves
right. But
from aid.
As we speak now, the reality is that donor support, is vital to carrying out some developmental projects in the country.
There is no denying that at all.
Should we expect any negative impact in the short term as we're trying to lessen our dependency on aid?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, you see, we're confusing the issues. And this morning I heard on radio people making fun about the fact that the president is talking of Ghana beyond aid. Yet we are receiving some support from the Germans in the sum of 100 million. And so that in itself essentially negates the vision that the president has clearly articulated. The president has not said that 11 months after he took over the reins of government of this country, he's built a Ghana that is no longer dependent on aid. No, the president has not said so. What the president has said is that, look, we as a country, from where we're coming from and the resources that we have, we are not poor, and that we should not continue to be a country that relies on aid to grow our economy. And that going forward, that's why I said it's an aspirational statement. It's a vision that he has, that going forward, we ought to put in measures that clearly takes us beyond aid.
Andrew.
And so then the question then becomes, what are you doing to take us there? It is not an event, it's a process. And so he's indicated clearly that we need to improve our agriculture, for instance. Because if we are able to produce what we eat sufficient enough to export, clearly we'll be earning foreign exchange.
And let's look at this realistically again, using the Ministry of Local Government, as that scenario. They receive 85% of approved annual budget in 2017 for their funds and all of that. The fund is expected to actually end this year. The Vice President of the Local Government Committee in Parliament, Kwesi Boateng, believes that this may negatively impact on the ministry's budget after 2017. How do you now balance, again, the need for or to move beyond Ghana aid with the economic realities?
But you see, I seem to be hearing the same thing over and over and over again.
I'm listening.
That the fact that the president has said that we need to build a Ghana beyond aid means that beginning today, we are weaning ourselves from aid. No. So we will still need donor support within the period that we extricate ourselves from the need.
But he's
to
saying
be
that
dependent.
he doesn't see that happening. They might not get it. So look at that. So again,
no, but of course, the aid basket in itself.
Sir, why can't the president hold on? Ghana is firmed up.
Why should he hold on?
And then he can say, okay, because we are a solid nation, we don't need aid.
But we are a lower middle income country. The aid basket is already declining. Okay? The reality on the ground is that the aid that we could access 5-10 years ago is not the same as we are assessing today. The donor support to our budget is declining, and we will get to a point where it is not going to come anymore. So what do? This is forward thinking.
Yes.
This is clearly is a president that is seeing
that's amazing. Forward
5-10 years from now, and is preparing
now,
you and I.
If we generate internally and we are dependent now, won't it boil down to transparency and accountability and good governance to actually get to where we want to get with the aid?
That's the kind of building blocks that you and I need to start focusing our attention on to get us to that Ghana that the president has clearly articulated his vision to get us to. We need to reform our banking sector, for instance. We live in a country where cocoa syndicated loans is financed from foreign banks because the balance sheet of our banks is not so big enough to take on high ticket transactions. In fact, even if all the 33 or 34 banks in this country put their resources together to syndicate the annual sums of money that we need to finance our cocoa purchases, which essentially is guaranteed, will bring guaranteed profitability. The Ghanaian banks cannot do it. So we need to build bigger banks. We need to consolidate.
Building bigger banks, doing the right things.
Absolutely.
Let's look at this. Transparency.
And clearly over the years, we've not done it.
We've not
had value for money,
right.
for our contracts.
We have $100 million, let's say, even 100 million Ghana cedis, and then we're expecting it to do A, B, C, D, E. Then at the end of the day, it's 50% of the money. Even if we say we are trying to generate the money internally, what about that? What about that? Doesn't it boil down to attitude? Doesn't it boil down to, well, this is how much we have. This is how much, transparency comes in, accountability. Everybody knows that this is how much has come in and this is how much we're going to use.
Absolutely. When you live in a country where 85% of your procurement is done by sole sourcing, what do you expect? So we are moving towards competitive tendering. We're saying that, yes, sole sourcing is needful when it meets the requirement as provided in the Public Procurement Act. Beyond that, everything else ought to be competitive so that you can derive value for money. So these are the things that we're saying that going forward we need to do. We need to be transparent in our procurement processes to ensure that this country gets value for money. You and I need to play a part. We cannot depend on government alone to do it because government alone cannot do it. That's why, like I said earlier, the finance minister during the third Ali Maha Memorial Lecture clearly articulated and made a call. And I heard people laugh that, he's quoting biblical scriptures to, but the reality is that we are where we are. We can't continue to be in this state. And so we need to move beyond where we are. And how to get there requires planning, requires some things to be done right. And these are the kinds of things that the government is saying that, look, within a 10-year time frame, if we are able to put in measures that reforms and transforms our agric, if we are able to formalize our economy, formalize our banking sector, improve the balance sheet of our banks, consolidate some of the banks to enable them do high-ticket transactions, participate in cocoa syndication that would yield profits that stays here to enable them lend to the private sector. If we are able to harness our gas, oil and gas resources and produce fertilizer here as opposed to spending in excess of 700 million.
If we are able to do all these fantastic things you're talking about without fighting corruption, let's look at what CDD says. They believe that Ghana Beyond Aid can, be met if President Akufo-Addo is able to tackle corruption properly. Considering the fact that, the fight against corruption has not been effective over the years, should we forget, about the Ghana Beyond Aid?
No, and I agree with the CDD that if we are unable to fight corruption, we may not be able to achieve the vision that the president has clearly articulated. So we need to fight corruption frontally. And I'm excited about the Special Prosecutors Act that was passed in Parliament last month. Indeed, I was part of the committee that reviewed the legislation. And believe you me, look, it's not directed at witch hunting anybody as was made for that Ghanaians were made to believe. It is a two-pronged legislation. One, to deter people from perpetrating corruption in the first place. And secondly, to punish people who engage themselves in corruption irrespective of the provisions of the act being in place. And I think that going forward, it will go a long way in helping in the fight against corruption.
So do we fight corruption before saying or going on Ghana Beyond Aid, or it should be in tandem?
Like I said, you see, Ghana Beyond Aid is a vision that we are working towards attaining. It will take us time to get to a point where we will be self-sufficient in using our own resources.
So which comes first? Fighting corruption first?
We are building a country. We are building a country that ultimately would attain a certain, you see, Ghana Beyond Aid is a point that we need to get to.
Right.
How to get there
if you don't
requires
get right,
fighting corruption.
Okay.
So we need to fight corruption before we can achieve that feat that we've set ourselves. That's why I said that I agree with the CDD that we cannot attain a Ghana beyond aid if we do not fight corruption. And so, yes, fight corruption. And how do you fight it? Legislation. Yes, I agree that we have several legislation on our books, and we have a challenge in enforcing some of them. So what do? The president, in his wisdom, thinks that, look, because of the notion that politicians have a way of protecting their own, if you like, and so they have a challenge in prosecuting some offenses that some government officials, and bear in mind, corruption is not only restricted to the political class. Civil servants, public servants, all perpetrate corruption on this country, and largely affect our fortunes as a country. So let's put in place a mechanism that empowers a certain office, devoid or insulated from political control, if you like.
Let's see how that goes.
Oh no, I think that
I need to take this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You are still watching The Hard Truth, and I have lawyer Andrew Egyapa Mercer. He's the MP for Sekondi Constituency. Andrew, if you're looking at depending on our own resources to develop, Ghana, we have to cut down on some expenditures to make some sacrifices. To a survey by the Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA, has recommended a review of quantum of an ex gratia paid to MPs and other Article 71 office holders due to public perception that current levels are widely excessive. Are you willing to make some sacrifices here?
Well, I don't think that my motive of going into politics was because of ex gratia receipts, and so I will welcome whatever considerations that the committee that is mandated
and
to
is
make
it
a
right?
determination.
So 4 years you leave Parliament, you get your money, you come again after a following term, and then you go back. Is it right?
I don't get which is right. You mean
it's not a one-off pay. Exactly.
Payments.
You come again and then you are paid all the time.
For me, it really is not relevant, because if the conditions are that you receive a certain number of months for every year of service, then it doesn't matter whether they pay you every 4 years or they pay you at the end of a 12-year service, because it will amount to the same anyway. So for me, the mode of payment and the regularity or the duration of payment is completely irrelevant.
We see, but again, to move Ghana beyond aid, it's very important to increase our domestic tax revenue inflows.
Absolutely.
Technical and vocational training contributes massively or positively to national revenue mobilization through, expanded tax net. What do you make of technical and vocational institutions in Ghana?
Well, the abandoned critical sector in our educational infrastructure, if you ask me, there's been really no coordination of the technical and vocational education space. The last count, these institutions were scattered across some 20 sector ministries, having oversight responsibility over various technical and vocational education training. And hence the need, and as articulated by the senior minister, for government to review and realign that space to put them under the Ministry of Education.
But is it an important part enough to warrant or support from government?
Absolutely, without a doubt. We know the focus on grammar, which is under the control of the Ghana Education Service. I went to a grammar school. That's the name of Adesadel at the time of inception. St. Nicholas Grammar School.
College, by the way, anyway.
Come on. There's no place like Adesadel.
No way, I'm out for.
Anyway, so clearly, our middle management space really is desirous of those skills. I mean, those skills are very much required in our productive sector.
But, yes.
But we are where we are.
Right. But how practical, has the approach of subsequent government in making sure that technical and vocational education is not only developed, but, can be appreciated by the populace? Because it's like, if I'm going to a technical institution, like I'm a second fiddle.
Yeah. That's very true. And we've not done too well in that space. And so I think that the decision by government to, as it were, place more emphasis on that aspect of our educational system is commendable. And I understand that the intent is to pull all these various technical training centers or institutions from the various ministries, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Manpower, Ministry of Employment, and all those agencies, and put them under the Ghana Education Service by the setting up of a technical and vocational council.
We already have a council for technical and vocational education, which was set by the Act of Parliament to coordinate and oversee all aspects of technical and vocational education in the country. What would the new Director General do, and that the council cannot do?
Well, the new Director General is going to be it's essentially the corporate setup, that the council essentially is the board of directors. One of them ought to be responsible for the day-to-day management of the setup. As we speak, we do not have a managing director, if you like, within the corporate space to manage the technical and vocational education.
So why can't they just empower the council to take on additional roles?
Yes,
why
the council,
do we have to create
the council is empowered to provide the directing mind, set policy, but all 9 or so members of the council cannot administer the management of the organization on a daily basis. So there's a need to have one person who is vested with administrative powers to manage it on behalf of the council. I think it's a regular corporate governance arrangement, but with particular emphasis on technical and vocational education as pertains in the grammar section with the Ghana Education Service. So I think it's useful that this is done so that we can have a proper handle on our technical and
So the council is not properly handling technical education.
Of course, there's a Ghana Education Council, but there's a Director General of the Ghana Education Service. And so stands to reason that we ought to have a Director General who is responsible or accountable to the council for the day-to-day management of the TVET sector, just as the Director General of Ghana Education Services answerable to the Ghana Education Council.
And what role are you expecting the private sector to play in technical and vocational training?
Critical, very, very critical, and particularly with the rollout of the One District, One Factory, which is private sector driven. It's important that we collaborate with the Technical and Vocational Education Council to fashion programs that would be required within the industrial space. And so the private sector's role, which has always, for us within the NPP, the engine of growth, is very, very important and really cannot be overemphasized.
So having a new director in place, what of our minds or the populace minds? Again, I asked about we technical and vocational playing a second fiddle. So how do we now reorient our minds to accept it as it is?
Well, I guess the focus is in itself changing, because now people are proud to go to the technical universities, who, as it were, even some of them focus more on the grammar aspect as opposed to the technical. But I mean, clearly, if the market for jobs is in the technical space, people would necessarily gravitate towards that end. I mean, if well-paid jobs are created in the technical space, the manpower management role is developed to the extent that I believe that people will feel proud to attend these schools. And of course, public education is also always important to get us all to understand that being in the technical field does not necessarily demean the individual. It's just the skills that people have. I mean, we all, like they say, the fingers are not the same. You know, I found myself where I am because I believe that I lack skills in certain fields. I have friends who are mechanical engineers, civil engineers, you know, technicians and all that. And, you know, we relate very well. We went to schools together all the way from primary school through to secondary. Some went to the science, GSTS and co. And, you know, that's the skill that they have. And they don't feel second class at all.
I'm excited to see what happens to that sector. But moving on, last Sunday night, gunmen, you know, used AK-47 rifles, open found traders at a market in Najong in the Bumfugu Yoyo district. How do you feel, or how did you feel when you heard the incident for the first time? Very
unfortunate. You know, there's been a lot of problems in that part of Ghana for a while. I mean, in the past, save that in the past few years, the intensity has not been as much as we saw over the last weekend. And I found it extremely gratifying that the majority whip, who is from that area, has called on all the political actors, particularly the MPs from the northern sector of Ghana, to work together to as it were, intervene in resolving this problem. I do not know if it is as a result of the chieftaincy or the creation of the district, because that also generated some fury when the district capital, I believe, was situated, or the proposed district capital situated in a location that was not acceptable to some people.
Right.
So I understand that the police are conducting investigations.
Mm-hmm. But talking about the police, the commander there in Bupubu and Yoyo, you know, Superintendent Stephen De Laporte indicated on Adom FM, I think last Monday, that the police, you know, are getting frustrated with the kind of violence happening there. Is the situation gradually getting hopeless?
Well, I don't think it's getting hopeless. I mean,
if the police, almighty police, are saying we are tired, we are frustrated.
Of course, I mean, if we live in a community where violence is recurrent, then of course, at a certain point, some fatigue would set in. But I think that the national security, the regional security is on top of the game. I understand that some additional complements of military and police personnel have been deployed there. It's a really hotspot, we know, with some of these chieftaincy disputes and other disputes that arise in some pockets of our country. But I think that with a collaborative effort of all the stakeholders, particularly following the call that was made by the majority whip, that all the MPs in the area, together with the vice president, who also hails from the north, should, as it were, put away their political cloaks and work together. I think that, look, I mean, there's always a solution to whatever problem
Andrew, but
arises.
Investigations
we just have to judge much more than, you know, resort to violence in resolving our differences. So I think that if we all put our efforts together, and the call that has been made by the majority whip, Honorable Matthew apologies, Matthew Nindam, Honorable Member of Parliament for the area. I've forgotten the name of his constituency. It would go a long way to abate some of these things in that part of Ghana.
Investigations, and you have shown that people, there use AK-47 and G3 and other expensive weapons. The question is, where are these weapons coming from? And could it be that we have some, influential people in society financing it?
But you and I know that there's a proliferation of arms in this country. I don't own one. I'm not sure you own one either. But it is the case that, I have not heard of the Small Arms Secretariat in a very long time. And I wonder whether this AK-47 and co qualify to be small arms. But that state institution, I believe, has not been up and doing, at least not in the media space in a while. And I think that if it still exists, they should be able to work towards resolving this proliferation of arms in our various communities. I mean, Ghana has enjoyed some relative stability, some peace over the years. We've been fortunate enough not to suffer the fate of some of our brothers on the African continent. And I don't think that violence necessarily, particularly with what we've seen in other places, is the way to resolving conflict at all. And so I would just use your platform to plead. There's always a way out. Every conflict can be resolved. We need to talk more. And I believe that when we engage more in that regard, we would attain results that would be for the mutual benefit of all concerned, as opposed to, losing limb in conflicts.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Hard Truth, and lawyer Egyapa, Andrew Mercer, Martin on your shade.
Not a problem.
MP for Sekondi Constituency is still here. Andrew, what's happening in Sekondi? I'm asking because it's been a while I went there, but the last time I went to Sekondi, I didn't see anything new, no development. As a new MP, what's happening? Tell us, what's happening in your constituency?
Well, Sekondi has seen better days. Of course, we all do not like its state as it is now, and so I guess one of the reasons that motivated our decision to go into the political space was to see what it is that we also can bring to the table to see how we move Sekondi forward. Of course, historically, it was a town that depended heavily on the railway sector. With the decline of the railway, clearly, that necessarily was going to take a toll on the town, and it did. Growing up in Sekondi, of course, there were some, industrial setup that we could boast of. Indeed, we even had a vehicle assembly plant in Sekondi. But going forward, I mean, there are some exciting things that...
Like what? What did you promise them in the first place to be elected as MP? And what have you started doing what you promised?
Well, we've started working on a few things.
What were the promises?
I think
Tell
that
us.
It's important.
Tell Ghana what the promises were. SMA are busy.
No, that's not a problem. I mean, we need some good polls. Thankfully, there's a proposal in our manifesto, party's manifesto, that has the potential to transform exponentially the fortunes of Sekondi for the better. There's a proposal to expand the port from Takrady to Sekondi. Of course, it's a private sector initiative that we're working to bring it to the front burner. We've engaged with officials of the GPHA and the ministry. All the plans have been completed. The survey plan for subsequent decision by submission to cabinet and approval for declaration of the entire space as Port of Takrady available for development is being done. And the plan is to build an industrial and marine estate, logistics space for the oil and gas.
How many employments, sir, are you hoping to create in Sekondi?
It will create huge amount of jobs for our youth.
Do we have numbers?
Well, I cannot put numbers to it now, but if you see the detailed plan of what it is that I'm talking about, and if you know Sekondi and you begin to
I know Sekondi, I lived there for 5 years.
What it is that the plan is intended to achieve, I think it will be.
So if you have a solid plan and you have,
so
you should be able to tell us
my
5,000 employment. Give us numbers.
I think
how many employment?
It's not even about the direct employment that it will create. It's the multiplier effect that it will have on the fortunes of Sekondi. I think that it would be huge and enough to go around for many people. And so, look, I mean, Sekondi is the capital of Western region that has or contributes more than 50% of the revenue basket of this country.
I see.
And so, if we are able to do the kinds of things that is in the pipeline, and if the railway, which I know the Honorable Minister of Railway Development, his passion to get it done, clearly, I mean, we all know what the railway can do to the development of communities that even passes through, much more a hub. And Sekondi is a major hub.
I hope to see it differently. I hope to see,
of course, I mean,
more developed.
Believe me,
but because of our time,
my vision for Sekondi is really to see a thriving commercial city that takes its pride of place in Ghana. And of course, it won't take only me. It will take the concerted effort of many people, many stakeholders. And we are doing what it is that we can within our mandate to ensure that the right people are engaged to facilitate the execution of
the project.
But
again, Andrew, finally, when you talk to especially the traders, they're complaining it's almost Christmas and the system is quite slow. And how do you promise us a better Ghana and all of that? But, you know, as they say, we are not seeing top yin. So what is it? What should we expect? Christmas is just around the corner. What should Ghana expect?
Well, I don't know who is complaining. Of course.
Oh, I mean, so people, it's better? Oh, no, so it's all like rosy and everything?
It's not all rosy. I mean, the challenges and difficulties that this government inherited has clearly, it's not intended to be an excuse. I'm only saying that when you begin at a certain point, you can do two things. Be responsible and fix the mess and build on it, or create more mess. Be irresponsible and create more mess.
That is your job. You want to celebrate Christmas. What should we expect?
Oh,
it's the slogan now.
I think that, we'll have a pretty joyous Christmas.
Yeah.
I certainly look forward to the end of year. Likely going to go to Sekondi and celebrate New Year in Sekondi because I tend to spend Christmas with my three wonderful kids and my wife here in Accra. And of course, we all go to Sekondi over the New Year. And I think that Christmas, as always, year on year, we hear the complaints, we all cry. But at the end of the day, we manage to put our best foot forward and have a Merry Christmas.
Something is just bugging me now in just 5 seconds. It's the president going back to Ghana Beyond Aid. Is he just trying to give us nice slogans? So making Ghana work again.
You should
Ghana Beyond Aid.
You should.
Is it just a slogan, or is he trying to build a brand around him?
He's not trying to build a brand around him. I mean, I get inspired every day when I see the president working so hard to transform this country and leave a legacy. He is a legacy-oriented president. His vision for this country.
So it's not just a slogan.
Not at all.
He's trying to leave a legacy.
As of, you should find out when he goes to work and closes on a daily basis. Makes you wonder whether his age is really what it is. He's working so hard, and I always ask when I have the opportunity that Ghanaians remember him in prayer. I mean, good Lord himself grants him more strength and wisdom.
And long life, most importantly.
And
thank you so much, Andrew.
We are grateful. For Ghana.
We are grateful to you. Thank you so much for talking to the hard truth. Lawyer Andrew Egyapa Mercer is the MP or Honourable Member of Parliament for Sekondi Constituency, and you've been watching the hard truth. What do you think? Are we going to enjoy Christmas? I mean, do you think that the economy is such that Ghana is going to be oh wow and Christmas is going to be all rosy? Send us a hit on it. And again, what's your own opinion of Ghana Beyond Aid? Is the president just, you know, creating some slogans or building, whatever it is? Let's have your comments on all our social media platforms on your page right now. My name is Nana Akosia Kunedu Asante Samuels. Thank you so much for watching. Catch a repeat of the program tomorrow morning. It's at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on the same channel. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.